I go to football matches all the time. I've been to big stadiums, small stadiums, local matches, and international games. Nothing strange had ever happened to me before. That's why I still think about what happened that night. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't some monster. It was something much harder to explain. Even now, years later, I still don't know if what I experienced was real. Years passed, and I rarely thought about that night. But even now, whenever someone mentions football matches, the memory comes back. It started when I decided to attend a match at a local stadium. At the time, I expected nothing more than an ordinary evening of football. I had no idea I was about to witness something that would stay with me for years. The match was scheduled for 8 p.m. I arrived almost an hour early because I wanted to avoid the crowd. Everything seemed normal. Fans were buying food. Security was checking tickets. People were taking pictures. I found my seat without any problems. It was in the middle section with a good view of the field. There was already a man sitting a few seats away from me. I didn't think much about it. He looked like any other fan. He was wearing a dark jacket and staring at the field. What I remember most is that he never looked at his phone, never talked to anyone. He just sat there. About 20 minutes before kickoff, I got up to buy a drink. The line was short. I was gone for maybe 5 minutes. When I returned, the same man was still sitting there, but something felt different. I can't explain exactly why. Maybe it was because he hadn't moved at all. Same position, same direction, same expression. It looked like he had been frozen in place the entire time. Eventually, the players came out. The crowd got louder. The match started. For a while, everything felt normal again. The home team nearly scored. Fans were cheering, people were standing. But every time I looked toward that man, he was still sitting perfectly still. Then something started happening that made me uncomfortable. Every time I looked at the crowd, everything seemed normal. People were watching the game, talking, eating, looking at their phones. But whenever I focused on the field for a few seconds, I got the strange feeling that people were watching me. I'd turn around quickly. Nothing. Everyone looked normal. I told myself I was imagining it, but it kept happening, again and again. After a while, I stopped paying attention to the match completely. I was paying attention to the people around me. Then the strangest thing happened. One of the players started moving toward the penalty area. Before he even took the shot, a group of fans behind me stood up. They started celebrating. I remember thinking they were reacting too early. Then, about 2 seconds later, the ball went into the net. Everyone exploded with excitement, but those fans had celebrated before it happened. I know that sounds impossible, but that's exactly what I saw. The stadium erupted. Thousands of people jumped to their feet. Scarves flew into the air. The roar of the crowd echoed through the concrete stands, so loud that I could feel it vibrating in my chest. For a few seconds, everything felt completely normal again. I even laughed to myself. Maybe I really was overthinking all of this. Football matches can make people act strangely. Maybe the fans had simply predicted the goal. Maybe the silence of the man beside me was just a coincidence. I wanted a normal explanation. I needed one. Then, I looked up at the giant screen above the stadium. Every football stadium shows a replay after a goal. It's almost automatic. The commentators usually analyze the shot while the crowd cheers all over again. So I waited. The screen flickered for a split second. I expected to see the replay. Instead, the attack started again. Not a replay, not a slow-motion highlight. The players were moving exactly the same way. The same midfielder passed the ball. The same striker made the same run. The same defender slipped at exactly the same spot. Every movement, every step, every second was identical. It wasn't similar. It was exactly the same. My smile disappeared. I leaned forward in my seat. What? Before I could even finish the thought, the striker fired the shot again. The ball hit the back of the net. And once again, the entire stadium exploded into celebration. Exactly the same cheers, exactly the same people standing, exactly the same arms raised into the air. It was like someone had pressed rewind on reality. I looked around, expecting confusion. Someone had to notice. Someone had to be pointing at the screen. Someone had to be asking questions. But nobody reacted. Not a single person. They cheered, sat back down, and continued watching the match, as if nothing unusual had happened. A cold chill slowly crept up my spine. For the first time that night, I wasn't watching football anymore. I was watching something that wasn't supposed to happen. Every logical explanation I'd come up with had fallen apart. Maybe the screen had glitched. Maybe I'd imagined it. I kept repeating those thoughts in my head, trying to convince myself that I wasn't losing my mind, without even realizing it. My eyes drifted back toward the man sitting a few seats away. For the first time since I'd arrived, he moved. Very slowly, not naturally. His head turned toward me, almost mechanically, like each movement had been carefully measured. He didn't blink, not once. His face showed no emotion, no surprise, no excitement, no fear, just an empty expression, as though he'd been expecting me all along. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. His eyes stayed locked on mine. Then, without changing his expression, he leaned forward ever so slightly. In a voice so quiet I almost thought I'd imagined it, he whispered, "You weren't supposed to see that." A chill shot through my entire body. The word barely escaped my mouth. Before I could say anything else, he slowly turned back toward the field. The crowd continued cheering. The match continued. And somehow, it was as if that conversation had never happened. But I knew exactly what I'd heard. For the first time that night, I was genuinely afraid. Hear it over the crowd. I needed someone else to notice. Anyone. I leaned toward the woman sitting in the row in front of me. She looked like an ordinary football fan. Team scarf, team jersey, a drink resting beside her seat. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me?" She didn't move. Maybe she hadn't heard me. The stadium was loud. I leaned closer. "Did you see what just happened?" Still nothing. Not even the slightest reaction. No sign that she'd heard a single word. I turned to the man sitting beside her. "Did either of you see that replay?" Total silence. They continued watching the match, as if I didn't exist. A strange feeling settled over me. It wasn't that they were ignoring me. It felt like they couldn't hear me at all. I stood up. "Hello?" My voice was louder this time. Several people were close enough that they should have looked. Not one of them reacted. Thousands of fans surrounded me, people shouting, laughing. Yet somehow, I had never felt so completely alone. That's when a terrifying thought crossed my mind. What if I'm the only real person here? I forced myself to breathe. There had to be an explanation. I looked away from the crowd. That's when I noticed the stadium clock. It read 83 minutes. I frowned. That couldn't be right. Kickoff hadn't happened that long ago. I blinked. The numbers changed. 12 minutes. I stared at it. Then, 54. Another second passed. 90. The digits kept jumping. Forward, backward, skipping entire halves of the match. It was like time itself had stopped following any rules. I rubbed my eyes. Maybe I was seeing things. I looked again. The clock had changed. Yet again. Nobody around me even glanced at it. The referee continued running. The players kept chasing the ball. The crowd cheered at exactly the right moments, as if the impossible clock only existed for me. A cold wave of panic washed over me. I reached into my pocket with trembling hands. If I couldn't trust what I was seeing, maybe I could trust my phone. I unlocked the screen, and what I saw next made everything even worse. I almost dropped my phone trying to unlock it. I took a deep breath. This will explain everything. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. If the stadium clock was broken, if I was just confused, my phone would prove it. I opened my football app, the one I always use to follow live matches. For a moment, the screen loaded normally. Then the fixture appeared. I stared at it, waiting for the live score. There wasn't one, no timer, no lineups, nothing. Instead, one sentence sat quietly at the top of the screen. Kickoff, 8 p.m. The match hadn't started yet. I frowned and refreshed the page. Nothing changed. I closed the app and opened another one. Same result. Different app. No live match. No score. No updates. My heartbeat became louder than the crowd around me. I slowly looked up from my phone. The players were still running. The crowd was still cheering. The referee blew his whistle. Everything in front of me looked completely real. But my phone said it wasn't happening. For the first time that night, I realized something far more terrifying than ghosts or monsters. Either my phone was lying to me, or reality was. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. There was only one thing left to do. I had to get out of that stadium. I didn't wait for another explanation. I didn't care who won the match anymore. I just wanted to leave. I stood up so quickly that my seat folded back with a loud snap. For a brief second, I expected someone to look at me. Nobody did. The crowd kept cheering. The commentators' voices echoed through the stadium speakers. The players kept running across the pitch. It was as if I had become invisible. I hurried toward the concrete steps leading to the exit. Every footstep echoed louder than it should have. The farther I walked from my seat, the quieter the crowd became. That didn't make any sense. It should have become louder. But with every step, the cheers faded. The chanting disappeared. Even the whistle from the referee slowly vanished, until all I could hear was the sound of my own footsteps. The cold night air hit my face the moment I stepped outside. My heart was still racing. I looked back at the stadium. The floodlights were still shining. It looked like a perfectly ordinary football match. I spotted a security guard standing near the main gate. He looked bored, checking something on his phone. I hurried over to him. "Excuse me," he looked up. "Has the match already started?" He frowned. "The match?" "The football match," I said, pointing toward the stadium behind me. "The one between—" I told him the names of the two teams. For a few seconds, he just stared at me. Not frightened, not confused, just puzzled. Finally, he asked quietly, "Sir, what are you talking about?" I asked nervously. "Come on, I was just inside. I've been watching it for almost an hour." His expression didn't change. He slowly shook his head. "Those teams aren't playing tonight." I felt my stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" "They don't play here until next week." "No," I whispered. "That's impossible." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my ticket. I held it under the bright light above the gate. At first, it looked normal. Then I noticed the date. It wasn't today's date. It was dated 1 week later. I froze. I pulled out my phone again. This time I opened the stadium's official website. No live match, No score, no match, nothing. Only one fixture was listed, the same two teams, scheduled for the following week. A strange feeling settled over me, almost as if the stadium itself was trying to erase what I'd seen. Slowly, I turned around one last time. The floodlights that had been illuminating the pitch began shutting off, one by one, until the entire stadium disappeared into darkness. The security guard glanced toward it, then back at me. "You okay, sir?" I couldn't answer, because I wasn't even sure I'd been watching a football match, or something that had borrowed its shape. I left without saying another word. For years, I convinced myself I'd imagined it, that I was tired, that my mind had played tricks on me. But every now and then, usually late at night, I still open my phone and search for that match. There are no highlights, no recordings, no proof that it ever happened, except sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the crowd cheering for a goal that hadn't been scored yet, and I've never, ever gone back to that stadium.